Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from the SugarHuddle.com. Well, I want to do a recap of my college football pick six picks for the week, how my picks fared. Let me go on down the line here and tell you how they all fared. So, Notre Dame ended up blowing out Syracuse 36-3. Eric Dungey, the Syracuse quarterback, got knocked out of the game in the first quarter. Anyways, I was right on the Notre Dame pick, but I thought they would win by a field goal, so obviously I didn't cover on that one. UCF beat Cincinnati 38-13, and I had UCF winning and covering, so I did both. So I won on both. Texas beat Iowa State 24-10, so I lost on both. I thought Iowa State would edge out Texas. Obviously, it didn't end up happening, and Texas totally controlled that ball game. Georgia Tech beat Virginia in overtime 30-27. I had Georgia Tech winning 21-17. Either way, the spread was like 5.5. I covered one way or another, and I got the winner right, so I won on both of those. Pitt Wake, I also won and covered. Pitt, I had them winning big, and I had them covering pretty easily. They ended up beating Wake 34-13, and they were actually trailing at half, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then finally, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. West Virginia obviously had their chances. They were actually up by double digits at halftime and even well into the fourth quarter, but they ended up losing 45-41 to Oklahoma State. Even if West Virginia would have scored on the final play, I would have gotten the winner right, but I would have still lost on the spread, so I would have split that. So as it stands, I ended up going 4-2 as far as overall winners this week, and 3-3 on the spread. As far as my season totals, overall winners. I'm 29-31 now, so I'm creeping back to that 500 mark. And of course, because I went 500 this week, I remained 6 games under 500 against the spread, 27-33. So, anyways, starting out, Notre Dame 11-0 now. They play my Trojans next Saturday. USC, just on a separate note, was horrible against UCLA, and hopefully Clay Helton's finally going to get fired. Anyways, Notre Dame should win that game pretty easily, but Notre Dame, got to give them a lot of credit. Defense was outstanding. Ian Book, he started like 10 of 14, and he ended up with 292 yards, a couple scores. Chase Claypool, who's had a few really good games this year. He had 6 catches for 98 yards and a score. He's 6'4", 227, big target for Book. And then Dexter Williams, running back, who's had a really, really nice year, only had 13 carries. We had 74 yards and a score. And, with Syracuse, like I mentioned when I started this, Eric Dungey, he's school record holding, great quarterback for them. And he leaves the game the first quarter with a back injury. And he got off to a slow start anyways. And Notre Dame had the lead early, but nonetheless, him going out just completely changed this game for Syracuse. And the way the game turned out and everything, I still think Notre Dame would have won by at least a couple scores, even if Dungey would have played well. I still think Notre Dame was going to win this game based on what I saw today, or Saturday, I should say. But, if you're Syracuse, all of a sudden you lose your starting quarterback, you don't play a whole lot of defense, so you know that you have to kind of win, shootouts to give yourselves an opportunity. And, Tommy DeVito, he's a freshman quarterback, so he's put into this really, really tough spot, especially when he's trying to replace his great quarterback by Syracuse standards. And he ends up going 14-31, 105 yards, a couple interceptions, 1.8 QBR. But again, he was in a tough spot, and Notre Dame's defense was able to put it into high gear. They ended up allowing 234 total yards and just 6 of 18 on third downs. Mo Neal, who's a really good running back for him, only had 74 yards on a whole bunch of carries. They had 38 carries, 119 yards as a team. So Syracuse was just kind of totally lost once Dungey went down. And, you figured a program like Syracuse, not really ready for the bright lights, playing in a big game like this against Notre Dame. Defensively, they really weren't terrible by any means, but it's just, and you're not moving the ball offensively, and you have those couple turnovers that led to some early Notre Dame points. Notre Dame had 20 points, and 10 of them were off of 2 interceptions in the first half at halftime. So, that makes it tough on any team, and it just kind of spiraled pretty quickly. But for Notre Dame, another really great win for them, and like I said, they should be able to win at USC next week. And obviously, all they got to do is win, and they're in the college football playoff 12-0 as either the probably 2 or 3 seed likely. So Notre Dame, I mean, in some ways, this reminds me of 2012, where a lot of people were skeptical of them as a 12-0 team at the end of the regular season. Of course, that was when the BCS was still around. And they end up going to the national title game and getting stomped by Alabama. And I think Alabama's going to kill everybody this year anyways. But, I think this Notre Dame team is much more legitimate than that team. I think their defense is a little bit more legit than that team's defense. Their schedule is better than that year's team, the 2012 Notre Dame team. Their schedule really wasn't all that, and I think their schedule is a little bit more challenging and a little bit more proven this year as we end the regular season. And I think quarterback wise, I also think a big advantage there when you have a guy like Ian Book, so efficient, so accurate. And so I think this is a Notre Dame team that's definitely more prepared to compete in the postseason and win possibly big postseason games. So, I got to give Notre Dame a lot of credit. Notre Dame's a team that I've certainly been skeptical of off and on at times this year. Even still with Michigan, I'm still not all in on them, but I gotta give Notre Dame a lot of credit with Ian Book. I mean, they're just a much better football team. So really nice win for Notre Dame. And then of course, UCF, Cincy. UCF doesn't matter what they do. The committee's not gonna let them into the playoff. But 23-game winning streak now. It was a raucous crowd right from the start, and UCF was way out of rhythm. Mackenzie Milton, who's 3-year starting quarterback, was way out of rhythm. Cincinnati came out fired up, and since he had a strip sack of Milton at the goal line beginning of the game, and they recover in the end zone for a touchdown, go up 6-0, miss the extra point, then they get the ball right back, have a chance to kick a field goal, go up 9-0. They miss that. They end up missing another field goal right after that because UCF scored to make it 7-6. Then since he had a chance to still pull ahead at 9-7, missed another field goal, and then from there it was just all haywire. UCF just ended up, they ended up going up, I believe it was 38-6, and then there was a garbage time, or it was 35-6, and then there was a garbage time touchdown by Cincinnati down the line. So, anyways, it was one of those things where it's just amazing, in the game of football, whether it's NFL, college, or whatever, how quickly the momentum can change in this one, because Cincy really had a great opportunity to take the crowd out of it pretty early. And, the thing with Cincy and Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, the announcers for the Saturday night game, they pointed this out that UCF, their defense really hasn't been that great this year. I mentioned in yesterday's video about all the rushing yards per game they allow and a lot of their struggles that they have on defense. And the thing is, this was a good matchup for them because Cincinnati is more of a ground and pound physical type team, and they're not a spread you out kind of team, and that really works out for UCF, because if UCF gets spread out, they have some issues, but physically, they can handle a ground and pound type of team, and that's exactly what they did in this one. UCF, I mean, we know in the state of Florida, all the speed, all the great athletes and everything else, and I mean, UCF's defensive line is when they have the right matchup like this game, they can be physical, they can be fierce. There were a couple of different possessions where Cincinnati was in UCF territory and driving, and they had a couple of fumbles forced. UCF recovered them, and that took Cincy out of the game. Cincy couldn't convert a 4th and 1. They were stuffed. So UCF has a fast, physical defensive line. They really started to get a lot of pressure on Cincinnati as we got deeper and deeper into this game, and it just made it really tough on Cincinnati's offense. So it was a great matchup defensively for UCF. And offensively, Milton eventually started to get into a rhythm. He did miss on some open throws here and there, but he also made enough of those throws. He ended up 13 of 25, but not really the important thing. He ended up with 268 yards and 3 scores. So a lot of the misses he had being a little bit off, a lot of that gets offset by the fact that he did make the important plays that he needed to make, that he did make enough of those big throws. And they were able to pull away from Cincy. And for Cincy, they have a real athletic freshman quarterback in Desmond Ridder, and 11 of 26, 127 yards, 20 carries, 70 yards, sacked a number of times. But Cincy still had 252 rushing yards, but it just goes to show that UCF made the big stops. They had the big takeaways. And, with Cincy, they came in this game, I think they only had like 7 takeaways or something like that. So I was kind of, the beginning of the game when they have that strip sack and they score, I'm kind of like, wow, really impressed, and how they had UCF's offense out of rhythm. And then suddenly the game just completely turned. So that really surprised me. But UCF, now they're going to be down at South Florida, I believe, next Friday, and then conference title game after that. So South Florida is a team that's been on the decline. So UCF, if they played their cards right, should be able to get a 24 straight win. They're just still not going to get a chance to be in the playoff, unfortunately. But anyways, really, really nice win for them, and they definitely made at least somewhat of a statement to the committee, regardless of if they move up or not. Texas, Iowa State. This is an interesting matchup too, because the way the Big 12 is doing their new conference title game now is they have a round robin, because there's only 10 teams in the Big 12, 14 teams in the Big 10. Go figure. But the way they're doing this conference round robin now, you play everybody. So you play 9 conference games, and whoever the top 2 finishers are at the end of the regular season play in the conference title game. And the way it's set up is Oklahoma and West Virginia were 1 and 2, and Texas and Oklahoma State were just right behind them, or Texas and Iowa State, I should say, were right behind them. So this is a huge game for both teams, because with West Virginia losing today, and then of course West Virginia has to play Oklahoma next Friday, so that's basically an elimination game. And so essentially, the winner of the Texas Iowa State game, assuming they win again next week, was going to qualify for the Big 12 title game, control their own destiny, and that's exactly what happened for Texas. Texas, of course, lost head-to-head against West Virginia, but they beat Oklahoma, so they're in a position where they just have to beat Kansas next week, struggling Kansas 3-8 team, and they'll be in the Big 12 title game. So that's big for Texas to get this huge win over Iowa State. Game that Texas completely dominated. They had 5 sacks. Brock Purdy, the freshman from Iowa State, he was 5-0 coming into this game, lights out. Iowa State scoring a whole bunch of points, and this one they just had no answers. He was getting terrorized, confused by a lot of Texas's blitzing, and really impressive, because Texas, they showed at times last year how talented their defense could be, but it wasn't always consistent. And this year, they just never really got on track, and they've struggled all year long, especially last 3 weeks. Last 3 weeks, 1,675 yards and 114 points combined they've allowed. They've lost 2 out of 3. This game, they only give up 224. And one thing that really threw Iowa State off their game is, of course, David Montgomery, their star running back. He was suspended for the first half of this game because of that fight he got into last week against Baylor. So that really put Iowa State in a tough spot coming in this one. So one of the things I mentioned yesterday is, if you're Texas, the big thing you have to do is really get a cushion at the half, because Montgomery, if it comes back in the second half, maybe he gets hot, maybe he gets them back in the game, maybe their offense starts to click. So really get that cushion in the first half. Texas ended up leading 17-3 at the half. They ended up going up 24-3, and then Iowa State ended up scoring a meaningless touchdown in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, Purdy, he had a tough one, 10-23, 130 yards and a pick. Montgomery came back in, for the second half, 10 carries, 33 yards, didn't do much. Kind of the interesting thing for Texas, Sam Ehlinger had a really, really nice game, another really strong game. He was 12-15, 137 yards, had a touchdown, also had 8 carries, 32 yards, and a score. So he had a great first half, got out to that big lead, 2-touchdown lead at halftime, but what used to be a big lead in college football before all the passing. But the interesting thing is, we've seen him bang up his shoulder a couple times this year, recently against Oklahoma State, and a lot of people were wondering, was he going to play last week, and ended up playing. Well, he actually left this game at halftime with a re-aggravated shoulder injury, and Shane Buechele came in and played. And Shane Buechele has always been a pretty decent quarterback at Texas, has a lot of starting experience. So it's not the end of the world, because it doesn't sound like Ehlinger's going to be missing any time. And frankly, if you can't beat Kansas next week, you don't deserve to be in the Big 12 title game anyways. So they could pretty much start Buechele and have Ehlinger ready to go, and Buechele could start the game and win, and then they could play the Big 12 title game with Ehlinger instead of Buechele. So I think Texas will be fine in that sense. But that is going to be something that's going to be interesting to monitor, and then it's something that's going to be interesting to see how Buechele plays, if he has to continue to be the guy. His career record's not great, but that's because he hasn't been on very good Texas teams. But he was 10 for 10, 89 yards in the second half, and he had a nice touchdown pass to little Jordan Humphrey. It was a 27-yarder, real nice throw. So Texas, they control their own destiny, have a chance to get to the Big 12 title game after all, and play either Oklahoma or West Virginia. So we'll see. But I was very impressed. I really thought Iowa State on the road was going to find a way to win in Austin. Austin hasn't been the toughest place to play in recent years, and This is impressive. Now Texas is this close to being in position to possibly winning their first conference title since '09. So we'll see what happens. But really, really nice win for Texas. Got to give them a lot of credit. I mean, a couple ACC games, unranked teams, but nonetheless, it was a battle coming into the afternoon that was intriguing because we didn't know if Pitt was going to win for sure against Wake or not. Pitt ended up winning to take the ACC Coastal, so this game gets canceled out a little bit. But Georgia Tech and Virginia, both teams second and third in the Coastal, with a chance to possibly still take the league or take the division if Pitt would have lost to Wake today. Like I said, that didn't end up happening, but it almost did. So anyways, this was a game where kind of low scoring early on, and then both teams started to get going. Virginia actually led 21-16 at the half. Bryce Perkins, he's had some ups and downs this year. He actually played really, really well, and the way he played kind of almost was like, okay, well, he's had some bad games when they've lost, but he's played really, really well when they've won. Maybe they're going to win this one today, or on Saturday, I should say. And he ended up going 21-26, 217 yards and a touchdown, 76.7 QBR. Also led the team in rushing, 16 carries, 73 yards and a score. But as a team, Virginia only had 130 rushing yards. And, second half, Georgia Tech, they really started to get going. They ended up with 268 rushing yards. Taquan Marshall, their quarterback, had 15 for 107. And big thing was both teams had a lot of success on third downs, but Georgia Tech had more third down opportunities. They were 10 of 18. Virginia was 5 of 9. So, Georgia Tech is their fourth straight win. They're a team that didn't really look like they were in good shape midseason, and now all of a sudden they're on track. So at the very least, even though they can't qualify for the conference title game, they have a chance to possibly finish 8-4. Remember, they play Georgia next week, so they have a chance to, possibly pull off an upset. And for Virginia, Bronco Mendenhall, kind of a rough start to his Virginia career as a coach, and after all that success at BYU all those years, and really, even though didn't get this win on Saturday, it was still it's still been a really, really nice season for Virginia. Brennan Armstrong, their backup quarterback, he had a 56-yard touchdown pass at one point in the first half. Virginia, they went down 27-24. They were able to score in the closing seconds. 8-play, 52-yard drive, kicked a field goal, forced overtime. And then in overtime, Georgia Tech kicks a field goal, and then Virginia, they miss from 35 yards, and that's all she wrote. But nonetheless, both teams are going in the right direction, and, would have been a nice win for either one of these teams, and especially Georgia Tech getting a fourth straight win. Like I said, getting them on track, and for Virginia, tough loss, but, learning experience, and at the very least, Bryce Perkins, like I said, he's been kind of hit or miss this year, and a really, really nice game for him. So, encouraging outing for him. But again, no moral victories. Nice win for Georgia Tech, and especially important win for Georgia Tech because, again, you play Georgia next week, so there's a chance you could get blown out. So this was at least something to close out your conference slate, to make you feel good and maybe give you a little bit of momentum heading into next year. We'll see. Anyways, as far as Pitt and Wake, Pitt improved to 7-4. They took the Coastal, big win for them. Pitt has been running all over everybody, and it's funny because I said, the reason why they won 3 in a row coming in is because they were taking the ball out of Kenny Pickett's hands. Kenny Pickett, is a decent quarterback, but when he's asked to throw a lot, he really struggles. And when you take the ball out of his hands, he can be a very efficient quarterback. And I think each of the last 3 games combined, he had like 43 combined pass attempts. I think less than 20 each game. So I figured if you make him throw it over 20 times, over 25 times, you might have a shot if you're Wake. Wake doesn't have a very good defense, but maybe they'd have an opportunity. Well, little did I know he was going to have 18 pass attempts at the half. And remember, Wake actually led 10-6 at the half in this one. So Wake, even though they weren't playing great by any means, they were in control of this one. They were actually up 3-0 until late in the half, and then both sides traded touchdowns. But yeah, Kenny Pickett, 14 of 18, 147 yards at the half. But Pitt couldn't run the ball. They didn't have a whole lot of rushing yards at the half. On the day, they only had 154, and I think they had like 40-some carries. So they really didn't have a whole lot of success against Wake's run defense. So got to give Kenny Pickett a hell of a lot of credit because this is one of the few times where he's put the team on his back and won it. And, he ends up with 316 yards, 23 of 30, and 3 touchdowns. So really impressive. Um, they had a 14-play, 85-yard drive that lasted just under 9 minutes. That put them up 6-3 late in the half, and then of course, they ended up going down 10-6 at half. But they outscored Wake 28-3 in the second half. Pickett just really kept doing his thing, and Wake, a lot of the struggles they've had. We saw how badly they struggled against Ian Book. Pickett did a really nice job. So I don't know what it's going to mean going forward because of the ups and downs that Kenny Pickett's had, but it's a nice win. And I think the interesting thing is going to be, can Pitt in that ACC title game in a couple weeks, can they really shake up this college football playoff and upset Clemson? I'm skeptical just for the simple fact that this Clemson team obviously has a great defense line and great against great as far as stopping the run. But the main thing with Clemson is we saw they were 2 years ago when they won the national title. They were kind of an iffy team that had that loss to Pitt mid-season, I think about 8 games in, and then they really didn't start to get going until after that Pitt loss, and then they really were red hot at the last few games of the season, won the national title. But it took a while for them to get going, and this Clemson team, it was kind of the same thing, but in recent weeks they've been red hot, and the way this Clemson team's playing, I don't think they're going to lose to Pitt in a couple of weeks, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see if Pitt can have any success running against them. So it's going to be interesting, but big for Pitt, big for Pat Narduzzi to get this win and kind of show that this Pitt team is making progress. This Pitt team, this program is somewhat on the rise. So very important win for them on Saturday, and now they're in the ACC title game, and we'll see what happens in a couple weeks. But nice job for Pitt. And then finally, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. Another Big 12 shootout. One of the things a couple of things I said about Oklahoma State coming in this game was that their defense was going to have to make a couple of key stops at some point, and if they can't make even a couple stops, they're not going to win. Well, they were down 41-31 with less than 5 minutes to go, and they're able to make 2 big stops, and including the very last play of the game, Will Greer drove him down the field quickly after Oklahoma State scored on a Tylan Wallace touchdown reception with 42 or 44 seconds left. West Virginia was able to quickly go down the field. They screwed around a little bit because they tried to do a quarterback run on the first play, and they didn't use one of their 2 timeouts. And I thought that was stupid on Dana Holgerson's part and probably cost them an extra play or 2. So West Virginia kind of screwed themselves game management at the end. But nonetheless, they were at around the 10-15 yard line, and Will Greer tried to drop back and scramble to his left and kind of throw off balance, and it was incomplete, broken up in the end zone. So Oklahoma State, their defense, regardless of the yards they gave up or anything else, they did what they needed to do. They had a fumble recovery that led to a field goal in the second half. They had those 2 big stops at the end of the game. So defense did what they needed to do. And the other thing I mentioned was Tylan Wallace. He's had all these great receiving games, like 220 yards against Oklahoma last week, like 222 against Texas. But that a second receiver needs to really step up and do something big to really help this offense, regardless of how many points they scored, kind of take that next step to be able to win a game like this. And I think if they would have had somebody else besides Wallace step up a little bit more against Oklahoma, maybe that game would have turned out differently. Obviously, Taylor Cornelius had a terrible 2-point conversion throw in that game, but nonetheless, maybe that game would have turned out a little bit differently. And this one, they did have somebody that stepped up, Dylan Stoner. He had 9 catches, 127 yards, actually led the team. So they did get that receiver step up. Wallace, he had some drops last week, but had all those yards, all those, catches. This week had 7 catches for 62 yards and some drops again, but he had 2 touchdowns, including the game winner. So he did what he needed to do. And Cornelius, he had 2 picks, and including a key pick, I believe, right before the half, but 30, 46, 338, 5 touchdowns, 266 rushing yards of the team. And the thing that really impresses me is, I mentioned this yesterday, is West Virginia, by Big 12 standards, they have an exceptional defense, was only allowing 20.9 points per game coming in, and pretty good against the run and pass and what have you. and they gave up 266 rushing yards in this one. So that was another key. So those were the three things that really kind of put Oklahoma State over the top in this one. Remember, they were down 31-14 at the half. And West Virginia's offense, they were just, complete halt. Their defense got off to a slow start to begin the game, and then they really started to kind of heat up towards the end of the half. Then they fell apart in the second half. Greer, by the way, was 27-48, 364, and a couple scores. But yeah, I mean, this is devastating for West Virginia because obviously the playoff hopes, any outside national title hopes are gone. And they're still in a position where they can get to the Big 12 title game, but they got to beat Oklahoma, which is going to be a tough task anyways. So they play them next Friday after Thanksgiving. And it's going to be a very interesting matchup because Oklahoma plays no defense at all. And I expect that game to be similar to this one. And the key is going to be, can West Virginia's defense, can they show up like they did at times in this game, but do it more consistently against Oklahoma and make the stops that they need to make to find a way to get the win. So that's going to be a very, very interesting game. That's a game that I am likely going to do for my well, actually, I can't do it for my Pick 6 because that's a Friday game, so I might have to do a special short video maybe on that game. We'll see. Well, just go to sugarhuddle.com and you'll figure it out. But anyways, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please check out sugarhuddle.com, and also like my Facebook page, which is just the Sugar Huddle. Thank you.